In a forgotten corner of the city, there was a small antique shop known as the Midnight Clockmaker. Although the shop was full of curious items, the centerpiece was a towering grandfather clock, standing prominently in the middle of the room. It was an imposing piece crafted from dark wood, with a pendulum that swung with eerie precision. According to the owner, the clock was over 2 centuries old and haunted. Nobody knew its true origin, but rumors claimed it didn't measure time. It measured the life of its owner. Carmen, a young enthusiast of antiques, stumbled upon the shop on a rainy afternoon. The moment she saw the clock, she was mesmerized. The owner, an older man with a weary appearance, warned her that it wasn't an ordinary item. "This clock always finds its owner," he said in a brittle voice. Ignoring his warning, Carmen bought it and brought it to her small apartment. From the very first day, the clock began exhibiting strange behavior. Despite not being connected to any power source, its hands moved on their own, marking hours that didn't align with any standard. Clock. Occasionally, a faint ticking sound echoed in the dead of night, even when the pendulum was still. Carmen dismissed the phenomena, attributing them to the clock's age. One night, while going through her emails, the clock emitted a piercing sound, like a muffled scream. Alarmed, she approached to inspect it. That's when she noticed something she hadn't seen before, an inscription etched at the bottom of the glass that read, "Time isn't measured, it's lived." Just then the pendulum began to swing wildly, and the hand spun backward at an unnatural speed. Carmen felt a sudden pressure in her chest, and before she realized it, she was in a completely different place. It was her childhood home, but something was off. The light was dim, and everything seemed shrouded in a gray haze. She walked down the hallways, calling out for her parents, but the only response was an echo that didn't match her words. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the end of the hallway. It was a tall man with a blurred face holding a pocket watch in his hand. "The time you borrowed must now be returned," he muttered in a deep, resonant voice. Carmen tried to back away, but every step she took brought her closer to him. Her legs refused to obey her. It felt as if an invisible force was dragging her toward the figure. She woke up abruptly in her apartment, gasping for air. But the clock was still ticking, now with an irregular rhythm, like a struggling heartbeat. That night, she began receiving strange phone calls. When she answered, all she could hear was the ticking of a clock. Desperate, she tried to return the clock to the shop, but it had vanished, leaving only an empty lot. As days passed, Carmen noticed that people around her began ignoring her, as if she were invisible. Every time she looked at the clock, her reflection in the glass grew paler and more indistinct. Finally, one day, she vanished completely. Legend says that whenever the clock finds a new owner, the shop reappears. The clock doesn't measure time. It measures the souls that cross its path, trapping them forever within its eternal mechanism.